Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight here at Southeast Alaska at the University of Alaska Southeast. My name is Eleanor Oidna. I'm an event planner for the offices of the Chancellor and Provost. On behalf of Chancellor Rick Caulfield, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Evening at Egan lecture series. Before I introduce our speaker for tonight, I'd like to mention a couple of lectures coming up in October and November. Next week, Dr. Allison Bidlack, the director of Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center, will discuss the Pacific coastal temperate rainforests, high sensitivity to small shifts in climate, and how these changes may have implications for ecological functioning. Throughout October, there will be lectures from UAS faculty related to their research and sabbatical work. And November brings weekly lectures related to that month's Alaska Native and Native American Indian heritage. Hard copies of the full schedule are available where you signed in when you entered the library. Which reminds me, if you didn't sign in, we would really appreciate it if you would do it on your way out. You can also see the full schedule on the UAS website under Evening at Egan. And finally, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. After the presentation, we do plan to have a question and answer period, but please wait until you have the microphone before you ask your question. And if you decide to respond to the answer, please also make sure that you've been handed a microphone. The library is closed during these presentations, but you're welcome to come back another day to peruse the collections. The emergency door exit is in the very far corner straight back and to your right. There is an elevator to your left, and at the library, if you take a right, there are restrooms down the end of the hall. And now, for our presentation tonight, I would like to introduce you to tonight's speaker. Orpheus Project, formerly Opera to Go, commissioned the production of the world premiere of the Princess Sophia opera. Katy, Giorgio, our speaker tonight, is the president of Orpheus Project and the producer of the premiere of the opera. She will talk about the commissioning and writing of the opera and some history related to the Princess Sophia. Miss Giorgio is a 2016 UAS alumnus who received her Master's of Public Administration and an occupational endorsement in accounting. Katy has lived in Juneau since 2012, so many of you may recognize her in other venues. Katy has played trombone in various groups, including the Juneau Symphony, the Taku Winds, Amalga Chamber Orchestra, Gamble and the High Cost of Living, and various stage productions with Perseverance Theater, Orpheus Project, and Juneau Lyric Opera. Katy, Giorgio, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Eleanor. And thanks to all of you for being here tonight. It's really great to see you. Yes, I'm Katy, Giorgio, and let me explain to you a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. As Eleanor said, I am the president of Orpheus Project, and those of you who have been around Juneau for a long time might recognize us by our previous name, which was Opera to Go, now Orpheus Project. And yes, I'm the producer of the Princess Sophia world premiere. And as, again, Eleanor said, I've lived here since 2012, but Juneau's been a part of my life since birth because my mother had two siblings move here in the 70s. And if you see this picture in the upper right-hand corner, that's me and my mother in Juneau in 1981 when we came here for my aunt's wedding. And so even though I'm relatively new to town as a permanent resident, Juneau has in a lot of ways been a home for a long time for me. I'm a musician by trade. I play the trombone. I received a Bachelor of Music from Rice University in 2002. I'm really a classically trained trombone player. And I received my master's in public administration from UAS, so it's really nice to be here presenting in my old university now. And I had a really weird day today. I need to get this off my chest. I have this really beautiful custom trombone that I got a couple of years ago, and it was stolen out of my car last night. And yeah, don't worry. It's been recovered, and it was found on the sidewalk outside the Triangle Bar this morning. Insert joke here. I haven't figured that one out yet. It's back in my hands unscathed, and so it's been kind of a wacky day. But here in the bottom, this is me and my colleagues on stage with the Juneau Symphony a couple of years ago. I'm really blessed to be very, very active in the music community here. In fact, I have to leave this lecture and go to the Red Dog Saloon for a gig after this. But I have a blast playing music in town. Juneau is so supportive of the performing arts, so it's really nice to be a part of that. And also this picture in the upper left, that's my dad and I when I was a baby, obviously. And you might not be able to see, but that t-shirt is from the Metropolitan Opera. And I grew up in a household that really valued music and opera, even though no one else in my immediate family are really musicians. But we grew up listening to opera when the Metropolitan Opera started doing the live in HD programs a while back. My dad and I would get tickets for multiple performances, and we'd have these Saturday afternoon daddy-daughter dates to the Met Live in HD, and so opera's been a really important part of my life. A little bit more about Orpheus Project. We've been around since 1996, and like I said, we changed our name a few years ago. It used to be the mission of the organization was to do kind of pocket-sized opera performances that we could pick up to go and take it around Southeast Alaska or elsewhere. But we realized a few years ago that that wasn't really what we were doing anymore, and it expanded. And William Todd Hunt goes by Todd. He's here in the audience with us today. He's our artistic director. So as a group, we decided to kind of rebrand, and that's where the name change came from. Here on the slide, you can see some pictures from some recent productions we've done, including we have West Side Story. This was some of the dancing from West Side Story here. This is the Amalga Chamber Orchestra last year, and then a few Orfeo, and I'm not totally sure which opera this was, but that was another opera we did. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and take you back to 100 years ago. I think most people here are already familiar with what happened with the Princess Sophia, but let me give you the brief overview in case you're not already aware. So 1918, the gold mining communities along the Yukon River, which you can see on this map here. It was October of 1918, and along the Yukon River, they had these stern wheelers that would transport people up the Yukon River to places like Whitehorse, where they could, if they wanted to leave the area, they would get on the railway in Whitehorse and go down to Skagway and board these Canadian Pacific Railway ships, and that would take them down to communities down south, Victoria, British Columbia, Seattle, etc. And really, the gold mines were not really doing so well. There was an epidemic of Spanish flu that was going on in 1918, also the waning days of World War I. Anyway, the last stern wheelers were leaving those communities the end of October of 1918. And so many people, business leaders, gold miners, others, were traveling to Skagway to take what was essentially the last ship out for the winter. And so all these people arrived in Skagway roughly October 23rd-ish, where they were to board the Princess Sophia, one of these CPR steamships, to go south. The Princess Sophia itself was a relatively new ship at the time. It had been commissioned and built in 1912, so 6 years old, fairly new ship, and it was one of the real luxury ships of the CPR line. And there was the Princess line, so there were other ones, sister ships, the Princess Alice and Princess Kathleen and others. But the Princess Sophia was sort of considered like the really beautiful one. And just to give you a little context about the size, I think a lot of us here in Southeast are familiar with the Lacani ferry. The Princess Sophia and the Lacani were pretty similar in size, just so you can kind of get a feel for really how big this ship was. So, they left Skagway a bit late. There was a lot of chaos and confusion in the docks on Skagway because everyone wanted to get on the Sophia, everyone wanted to get out. And so there was, by accounts from that day, people sort of wheeling and dealing their tickets and people trying to get on and all this sort of, there was just sort of a mad crush to get on the ship. So they left a few hours late and they pulled out into Lynn Canal and encountered a very, very bad snowstorm, high winds, high waves. And as you know, if you've been around for a while, you know that Lynn Canal is just a big wind tunnel. And so what was happening, the wind was coming down from the north and pushing the Princess Sophia, and they were trying to make up time because they had left late. So they were going full speed. They had this big north tailwind pushing them along. So they were going probably just about as fast as they possibly could. And there was a slight navigational error, and they ran right into Vanderbilt Reef, which is the only thing in Lynn Canal you can possibly hit. And that happened about 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 hours after they left Skagway. So they run into this rock. You can imagine everything got jostled around and people woken up and all of that. But after a few minutes had passed, they realized they weren't really going anywhere. They were really up on this rock. And I think they were able to sort of in the moment relax a little bit and realize they weren't sinking, and things were relatively stable. So they called for help, and they sent out wireless communications, and so a rescue boat started responding from Haines and also Juneau, and they arrived sometime in the morning on October 24th, and the storm was raging on, and really the position of the boat and the rock and the weather, they couldn't get any of the rescue ships close enough to get any of these people off. And they did try. They did try for roughly 40 hours to find a lull in the storm, to get everyone off. And really, because they seemed to be pretty stationary, they made the call, the judgment that we're just gonna wait. We're gonna wait for the storm to die down. And that's when we'll try to safely remove passengers from the Princess Sophia. On October 25th, however, the storm was raging again. The rescue ships went in the afternoon. They went back to seek cover behind, different sheltering islands and coves and whatnot. And on the morning of October 26th, they returned and found that the ship had sank, and all 350 passengers had died. So this was a picture taken from Vanderbilt Reef. And you can see that this is just the forward mast that was still visible out of the water. So obviously it was in the newspapers, but the thing was, no one really wanted to talk about the Princess Sophia at this time. There was a lot of death. The World War I was going on. They were printing lists of casualties in the newspapers every day. But clearly, this is the Daily Alaskan here in the upper left, the Victoria Daily Times and the Alaska Daily Empire. These were all from October 26th, the day that they discovered that the ship had sunk and everyone had died. And this is Vanderbilt Reef just last year. Now the thing is, we basically forgot about the Princess Sophia because, as I said, at the end of World War I, Armistice Day was November 11th, 1918, and no one wanted to worry about death and this horrible accident. When Armistice Day came around, they were throwing a big party. They were happy, and actually the CPR line, they sent the Princess Alice up to retrieve the casualties from Juneau, the ones that had been recovered, and they arrived in, it was either Victoria or Vancouver on Armistice Day, and the dock in that, was it Victoria? Who remembers? Anyway, they were told they couldn't land. We're having a big party. They said, you're going to have to wait. We can't have this come into the harbor right now. And so they actually waited for a whole day to land and unload the dead. I want to jump back to today. So artistic director William Todd Hunt, that we call Todd, he's sort of our artistic visionary guy at Orpheus Project. And we are having trouble remembering how this actually came about. But Todd somehow found out about the Princess Sophia and that 100th anniversary was coming up, though we've been trying to figure out how you found out about it, because you had never actually heard about it, Todd, right? But he thought, hey, wow, this is a pretty incredible story. He researched it a little bit and realized that it was sort of the perfect material for an opera. I think generally speaking, when we think about opera, we think about, love and death and kind of horrible things sometimes. And Todd, he's brilliant and realized that we should commission an opera to coincide with this 100th anniversary. So the thing that you do if you have this idea first is, Todd, I think, thought about writing it for a little bit, but then decided against that idea because he's also a composer. But the first thing you do, you really need to start with the text, the words. It's called a libretto in opera speak. And so Todd called up a guy he knows, Dave Hunsaker, and he is a very accomplished writer, playwright, screenwriter. And here's Dave. And sort of pitched the idea to him, not even knowing if Dave had even heard about the Princess Sophia before, and he jumped at the chance. He's like, yes, because he actually had done a sort of a dramatic reading, sort of telling of the story about 20 years ago with his friend Dan Fruits. So Dave already knew all about the Sophia, and so he was really excited to join us. The second part to writing an opera, of course, is the music. Usually that's not done by the same person. The librettist will be a librettist and a composer. And Emerson was sort of on our radar around the time that we were talking about this opera, because in 2015 we had done this really great couple of concerts here in Juneau where we featured Alaskan composers. And Todd already knew Emerson, but Emerson wrote a piece for wind ensemble that was called A Little Beer Music, and it was a suite of songs based on beer from the Hoodoo Brewing Company. So that was performed here as part of that festival. That's when I first met Emerson, and he's wonderful. He writes beautiful, beautiful music, and so Todd called Emerson as the first person to come to mind to do this, and Emerson also jumped at the chance, and so Dave and Emerson got to work together, and I really wish I could have been privy to more of those conversations that happened between those two guys, because I think at times Dave had a particular idea about how something should sound and feel, but Emerson had a very different idea. And so they had to work out some of those creative differences with each other. And I heard little bits and pieces sometimes in meetings, but it's like, I think that's a really fascinating process when you have to be a co-creator of a large opera, and then you have a disagreement about if something should sound happy or not. So that I think they worked well together, and I think that was a really beautiful relationship. So Dave and Emerson are off writing the opera, and we start talking about the performance. So like, how are we going to have it performed, and who is going to work on it? So we put together what we call the production team. Dave Hunsaker, who is also the librettist, was sort of a natural choice to ask to be the stage director for the opera. Of course, he knows the whole thing perfectly by heart, and he also has a lot of experience in the theater, so he was the kind of the natural person to be our director. Of course, Todd will be the artistic director and the conductor of the orchestra. I'm Katy, and Annie Calkins, who's Dave Hunsaker's wife, is my co-producer. Genevieve Carson, whose parents are here today, she is our choreographer. I'll talk about her a little bit more in a minute. Haley Duran from Juneau Dance Theater is our assistant choreographer. Dan Fruits is our visual artist, and I'll show you some of the work that he's been doing too. Then we have Shelley Wright with our costumes. Jim Samard is here too. Hi, Jim. Doing our set, and Greg Mitchell is doing the projections for us. One of the elements of the opera, so the visual elements, is Dan Fruit's paintings. I think he's not quite next. I'll get to that in a minute. So we start having these meetings like a year and a half ago, usually on a monthly basis, where we'd get the production team together and touch base and see where we are in our process, if we need to get help from one another, bounce ideas off, what have you. So this was a meeting, I don't know, sometime this summer where you can kind of see there's this fabric on the table. So Shelley, our costume designer, and Haley, who's our assistant choreographer, and Dave were talking about material for the costumes for the dancers. So just, yeah, sort of powwowing on that. So here's Dan. So Dan has created 20-ish new paintings that we will feature as part of our production. This is one of them here on the left. And here's Dan in his studio. And this one here was one he had in progress at the time. It is also one of the sort of the final paintings of the collection. And so like I was saying before, the way that we're working this in is we are bringing in very high-powered projectors that we don't have anything that can accomplish what we need here in Juneau. So they're going to come up from Seattle on a plane and be installed at Juneau Douglas High School auditorium. And we need 4 projectors to also accomplish what we're trying to see when you have projectors, and the image needs to go a long distance and then also fill up a big space. You need some very high-tech projections. So that's how you will be able to see these paintings as part of our production. Let's talk about the dog. This is another one of Dan's paintings. So the story goes that a day or two after the Sophia sank, an Irish setter swam into Tea Harbor, and they believe that the dog had escaped the Sophia and swam, I think it was something like 7 miles to Tea Harbor. And I believe that someone took the dog in, and it was said to live out its days on the docks in Tea Harbor. Now, whether or not that actually happened, I don't know. I like to believe in the dog, personally. And as I talk to people ask me, like, is there a part for the dog? And sure enough, there is. Jim sent me this picture this morning while I was dealing with my stolen trombone, and it, totally made me feel better. This dog. So what we're doing, we are not going to have a live dog on stage with us. That's just not. We don't want to be upstaged by the dog. But what we are doing is basically creating a puppeted dog, and our dancers will be the ones who are manipulating this puppet. And I'm really excited to see the finished product. I think it's really going to be fun. Now, it's not an it's not an Irish setter. So I hope people forgive us for that inaccuracy, but I think the point will be made. And I'll also, while I'm on Jim here, so Jim is also, besides puppet design, he's also our set designer. And I don't want to give a lot away about what our set is like. But what I will say is I'm really excited for it. And Jim and also Bing Carrillo and Bo Anderson have been working together very closely on the set design and the elements and some complicated rigging and also some safety measures. I haven't quite talked a lot about the dance yet, but what's going to happen with our stage is we're using the extension at JDHS Auditorium, and what that means is that there will be basically a hole in the middle of the stage where the orchestra pit is, and the dancing will happen in front of that and some behind that. But when you have a hole in the middle of the stage and people dancing, we're very concerned that we keep the performers safe. So they're working on safety railings that look like ship railings and things like that. So we're excited to see how that all comes out. Here's Genevieve. So Genevieve grew up here in Juneau. She actually is a really good friend of my cousin from growing up. And Dave and Annie approached Genevieve a year or two ago and started talking about maybe we could somehow get them involved. And she is the artistic director of the LA Contemporary Dance Company now. And Dave really believes in having dance elements in opera, and that's something that is very traditional. If you go back in performance, is to have dances as part of the opera, and I think Dave really wanted to make that happen with this production. So we are really excited to have Genevieve as our choreographer. She won't actually dance in the performance, she's just the choreographer, but we have 5 of her company members that will be coming to Juneau. And we're working with 4 local Juneau dancers from Juneau Dance Theater. And so in these pictures, this is from August, and Haley Duran where's my mouse? This is Haley, working with some of the company members. And they spent a week in rehearsals. And so Genevieve could basically teach Haley what the choreography was going to be so that she could come back to Juneau and work with the Juneau dancers. Because obviously Genevieve's a very, very busy person. She's about to go to New Zealand with her company, but she couldn't spend the time needed here in Juneau to teach all the choreography. So it really worked out beautifully, I think, this collaboration, and I can't wait to see the finished product here. So some of the activities that have been going on lately, or in the last year, last September, we did a really beautiful Allen Marine catamaran cruise to Vanderbilt Reef, which you can see behind us in this picture, where we had the Pioneers of Alaska with us, retelling the history out at the reef. If you haven't really been out there before, it's a really moving place to just sit and contemplate what happened there 100 years ago. We liked it so much, we did it again this year. So this was just a few weeks ago. We did basically the same thing where we chartered Allen Marine to take us out to Vanderbilt Reef. And a little hard to see, but it was a beautiful, it was one of those 60-degree sunny days that we were treated to this month. And it was just absolutely beautiful and calm out there too. So Vanderbilt Reef, you can see, is behind us. And this is Bernard Holcomb. Bernard is our Captain Ledbetter, who is the captain of the rescue boat Cedar. And this year we were able to also have some of the music performed as part of our program on the cruise. And I thought this particular moment was very moving to me. The aria that Bernard sung was about how he actually had a light or a marker that had been sitting in Juneau that was intended to be installed at Vanderbilt Reef, and his boat was the one that was supposed to go do it, but they hadn't been able to install it yet. The weather was bad, whatever the circumstances were. And so he sings this aria about the ship's already on the reef and how he feels really, really horrible that like they haven't been able to, improve the safety on the reef. And he describes the reef in this aria, and to hear the music and be out there and looking at it while we're hovering over basically the area where the ship still lies today, it was pretty cool. We have been sort of doing sort of little mini performances here and there of portions of the music over the last year. With an opera of this scale, it's dangerous to wait until the premiere to try doing it. So we've had these sort of bite-sized pieces along the way where we're able to perform the music and find what works, because the programs that are used to do music notation, they can produce like a MIDI sort of electronic version, out of the computer of the music, but you really can't get the sense of what it's really going to sound like with actual strings and brass and all of that. So when they actually hear it with actual instrumentalist, then I think I remember at this particular concert in November last year, Emerson heard some things in instrumentation that he did not like when he heard it for the first time in person. So it was a chance to go and make some tweaks there. March of this year, we had what we called the Princess Sophia Workshop Week. And so we got just as many of the cast members as we could here in Juneau together, along with the production team. We had Emerson here, of course Dave was here, and it was a chance to workshop and do coachings and really do a deep dive into the opera. This particular day, we were at Riverbend Elementary and Juneau Lyric Opera. So, sometimes people get us confused because we're the two opera companies in town. But Juneau Lyric Opera, they're really partners with us, and especially in this case because they are taking charge of the educational outreach portion of the production. So this was something, this particular day in March was arranged by Juneau Lyric Opera. And so here, on the left, this was Emerson, and on the right, Tess Altiveros, who's our Lulu May Eads, talking with the kids and singing, and they were enthralled. It was really very cool. This was not the only thing that Juneau Lyric Opera was going to do for us. When we are doing our premiere in a few weeks, they have arranged an in-school performance for students here in Juneau. And so they're going to be busing kids in from different schools, and it's Wednesday morning on the 24th. I'm really excited for that, to get all those kids in the auditorium and expose them to opera. A lot of them haven't been exposed to opera before, and also to help tell the story of the Princess Sophia. This was again from that week in March. A Zitz probe is a term not many people have heard of. It's really a seated rehearsal or a run-through of opera or a musical theater performance. So as you can see, we have the singers here. They're sitting or standing when they're singing. They don't have to have anything memorized. And we had the full orchestra. And we ran through the whole opera and didn't really rehearse it. There was preparation beforehand, but this was just getting everyone together, running the whole thing, just to see what would happen. And again, Emerson and Dave, I think, took a lot of notes away from that particular experience and made some changes based on what they heard. I've been really honored to be a part of the Sophia committee. And we had started working on the opera, and I got a call one day from Mary Lou Spartz, who I'd heard of, but I had not met. And Mary Lou invited me to join these meetings that they were having about once a month or so. And it was a group of people who, in some way, shape, or form, were interested in the Princess Sophia anniversary, or different groups that were already planning things. So I started attending these meetings quite a while ago. I mean, a couple of years, I think. Again, led by Mary Lou. Hi, Mary Lou, she's here. And here some of the organizations and the people that have been involved. And it's been really cool, because I've gotten to meet people I wouldn't normally meet, and we've been very supportive of each other's efforts. And Carl Broderson did a website for us. It's called rememberthesophia.org, and it has links to our sort of separate websites. It has some pictures, and it also has this awesome calendar that he put together. So it was a one-stop shop. Excuse me. Pardon me, I'm gonna take a water break. One-stop shop to see everything that was going on with different commemoration events. And so it was a really nice thing to be able to just hand to people and use as a guide for everything that's been going on around the city with all of the different organizations. I love this picture. So the pioneers have done a lot for Juneau and the Princess Sophia. This is at Eagle Beach State Recreation Area. If you go to that sort of first parking lot where the restrooms are, this was installed in late June or July of this year, and they commissioned this beautiful plaque that you can see here on the left, and then an interpretive sign, which is on the right here. And these guys really, they did all the work themselves. They dug the hole and they planted the rocket. They were real rock stars getting it installed. Rock stars. Huh. And so if you haven't been out there already, make sure, even if you're just driving by, just pop into that parking lot. And it's not within sight of Vanderbilt Reef, but Vanderbilt Reef is just around the corner. And so I think it was a really nice place to have that plaque installed. Okay, so why do any of this? Again, this is another one of Dan's paintings. And I think my answer to this question has changed over time a little bit. And let's see, I think I want to talk about going to see Ken Coates speak a few weeks ago, because this kind of his talk changed things for me a little bit. So Ken Coates wrote the book on the Princess Sophia. If you can get copies of it around at Hearthside and where else, and the State Museum had him come in for a talk 3 weeks ago or so, and I didn't really know what to expect from a lecture from a historian, and he was wickedly funny and charming and wonderful, and I learned a lot that day. So Ken grew up in Whitehorse, lifelong Yukoner, and was a big history nerd growing up and became a historian naturally. And he was actually researching the Yukon's response to World War I. By the way, at this point, he had never heard of the Princess Sophia, even growing up in Whitehorse. And he was painstakingly going through Dawson City newspapers from World War I, and he's getting towards the end. He's seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and he comes across a paper it was probably October 24th, about the Princess Sophia being stuck on Vanderbilt Reef. And I think he thought to himself, oh, this is surprising, I didn't know about this. And he gets to the next day, and they're still on the rock, and then he gets to the next day, and the ship sunk, and all 350 people had died, and he kind of couldn't believe he didn't know about it. So he took this on as a project to explore. And long story short, he had a heck of a time finding any information anywhere. No one seemed to know anything about it, or very, very trace information. And he ended up finally tracking down court records from the 2 court cases that happened after the shipwreck. And like literally they like dusted them off out of the file room and like hadn't been opened in 80 years or something. And so when he wrote this book, this was really the first time anyone had really heard of this in sort of modern times. He wrote this book in the early 90s. And a couple of interesting facts about that too is he said that, so of the people who were still in the Yukon when the ship sank, of the white population, basically none of them still lived there 40 years later. And so you didn't have sort of that direct connection, family connections or community connections anymore, 40 years later in the Yukon, so people weren't talking about it then. And the thing about Juneau is people didn't really know about it here either, because we also didn't have direct family connections to the Princess Sophia for the most part. The passengers were from interior Alaska and from the Yukon Territory or elsewhere, but there was just one person on the Sophia from Juneau, and that was John Pugh, who had traveled to Skagway. No relation to Chancellor Pugh. But he had traveled to Skagway as a customs officer to help with what everyone anticipated to be this very chaotic boarding of the Sophia. So we don't have that kind of family oral history that's been passed down about what happened to our own families. But of course, I mean, the people of Juneau were very involved at the time. They had to respond to 350 people dying, and of the bodies that were recovered, they were brought here to Juneau. And Mary Lou and John Greeley have actually just written a publication, is what they call it, Disaster on Our Doorstep. And what it focuses on is Juneau's response to the Princess Sophia. And it's on the barge. The copies are on the barge coming to Juneau very soon, so I'm told. And so be on the lookout, I think, maybe next week at First Friday, they'll be somewhere with this. John's crossing his fingers. Yes, with this publication, I'm really excited to see it. And of course, we do have victims buried here in Juneau at Evergreen Cemetery, most notably Walter and Frances Harper, and they have a very nice sort of gravestone for them there. But anyway, the thing about Ken Coates that really struck me was, first of all, again, if he hadn't written that book, if he hadn't stumbled across it, it might still be forgotten. I don't know. And the other thing, too, is like, how do we keep this story in the forefront of people's minds? How do we keep getting more and more people aware of what happened here? And also, of course, this year, the 100th anniversary, we're taking this opportunity to commission plaques, to have events, write opera, all of this sort of thing. Because it's the 100th anniversary, how do we make sure it's not just a blip and that it's not another 100 years before someone thinks, oh, we should celebrate this thing that was 200 years ago? So for me and for Orpheus Project, I think that the opera is a way to memorialize this story and remember what happened, but also have it performed again and again and again. What we don't want is for these 3 performances that happen at the end of October to be the only ones that ever are performed. So it is a very high-level goal for us to have this opera performed elsewhere. And we have our site set. There's nothing scheduled yet. We're working on it. But I think we have our site set on Whitehorse. We have our site set on Victoria, maybe Vancouver, Anchorage, maybe a concert version in Dawson City. And then we hope it grows on from there as well. And again, it's something that I want, it's like my life's mission now, to keep the memory of the Princess Sophia alive and continue having the opera performed. Some of the events still to come between now and the end of October. I think it might be too late. Dan Fruitz's paintings have been on display at the Juneau Douglas City Museum this summer, and they're being taken down tomorrow. So if you happen to want to get up early and go over to the museum to check them out in person, you can do that, I think. Otherwise, you'll see them in our opera in a few weeks. The Titanic of the North exhibit at the Alaska State Museum will only be there for another week. If you haven't seen that yet, it's really fantastic. They have this video. It's almost 50 minutes long. It's a long video, and Claire from the museum keeps saying that people come in, and she never expected that this was going to happen, but people sit and they watch the whole 50-minute video, and they're just enthralled by it. But there's all sorts of great artifacts, and the Pioneers of Alaska, another wonderful contribution is that they purchased essentially a traveling exhibit, multimedia exhibit on the Princess Sophia, which they then donated to the Alaska State Museum. So that's there as part of the bigger exhibit. I don't know exactly what happens with it next, but it's going to travel around Alaska. And Whitehorse, maybe. I don't remember the details there. But anyway, so the 100th anniversary is Thursday, October 25th. The annual dedication ceremony, which happens every year at the graves of Walter and Frances Harper, will happen at noon. 5 o'clock, we have the Princess Sophia Remembrance Ceremony. So that will be kind of the formal ceremony. We have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police coming. We'll have like a very formal ceremony there. It's open to the public. Please come. And then at 8 o'clock, we're premiering our opera. Thursday night premiere is a little unusual, but it was really important to us to have it coincide with the 100th anniversary. And took a lot of work to make that happen, but we did it. And the next day, actually, we don't have a performance, but the Juneau Yacht Club is doing a Princess Sophia commemorative dinner. There's 2 seatings for that, and tickets are on sale. Barbara's here tonight if you'd like to ask her about that. And they're going to be basically recreating what a typical dinner would have been on the Princess Sophia. And then we have 2 more performances of the opera that weekend on Saturday night and also on Sunday afternoon. If you are interested in helping at all, some of the ways you can help is we're still fundraising. It's a very, very expensive production, by far the most expensive one that Orpheus Project has mounted to date. So if you or your business or political campaign would like to contribute, it's really good timing if you want to buy an ad in our program if you're running for office. We have several people coming from out of town, visiting artists and other production staff people, and so we're still hunting for some places for them to stay and vehicles for them to use. You can volunteer if you're interested in helping with tickets at the box office or ushering, that sort of thing. We could use more people there. We're also looking to fill some seats on our board. So if it's something that you want to get even more involved in for this and for the future, talk to me. And of course, attend our performances. We really would love to see all of you there. And you don't have to come just once. You can come 3 times if you want. I encourage it. It gets better every time, I'm sure. And please stay in touch. I have some flyers with me that you can take with you. It's got our contact info, the website, some information. But we have a website. It's orpheusproject.org. Info at Orpheus Project gets to me and to Todd. And we're on Facebook, so you can come find us there. And so just to cover a few just details about the opera, again, it's the 25th, 27th, and 28th of this year at Juneau Douglas Auditorium. It is in English. Um, but we're going to have super titles, so the words will actually be displayed kind of like subtitles, but above the proscenium. The idea is that even though it's in English, sometimes it's still in opera can be hard to understand when you have lots of voices singing together or big dramatic moments. You don't have to worry about not understanding what's happening. You can read along. Tickets are on sale. You can buy them online at orpheusproject.org or in person at the Jack in Hearthside Books. I think that's all I have to cover on that. Oh, and that's the end. Great. Okay, I'd love to take your questions. So questions, we'll need the microphone, and Eleanor is on her way. No softball questions, Charla.
First of all, thanks for being here. I have two questions. One is, through the research, I know there's like the logistical historical facts, but was Ken Coates able to pull together actual factual information about the passengers, and will any of that be included in the opera? And if so, has there been any contact with descendants of the individuals who were on the ship?
Thanks, Charlotte. So, we tried to be as historically accurate as possible, and I think Dave really used Ken Coates' book as the main source for information for when he was writing the opera and for character information. And I, there's maybe, 10 or 12 like named characters that you really get to know as part of our opera. We were not in touch with Ken Coates to fact check or any of that. And I do admit we are aware of a couple historical inaccuracies that were written in, but we were not aware of at the time. But we don't feel that they're significant enough to go back and rewrite. So, people are going to have their opinions, and they're just gonna have to keep them to themselves. And no, I'm just kidding. But did that answer your question? Yeah. Oh, and with the descendants, we have been not directly in touch with any descendants, though I've been being told about descendants coming to Juneau for the 100th anniversary, and I keep saying, put them in touch with me, but I haven't actually talked to any descendants yet. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dennis Harris.
Hi, Dennis.
Back in the early days of KTOO, I was one of the people that helped start it. We had a volunteer at the station, a woman who had moved to Juneau and was a volunteer at KTOO, and somehow or other, I do not know how, but I'm going to get in touch with her because I want her to come see this. Sheila Toomey, who worked for the Anchorage Daily News for many years, got her start in journalism in Juneau, working on KTOO's evening television news broadcast. And the way she got the job was her audition piece was a program she had researched for almost 6 months about the Princess Sophia, which most people in Juneau at that time would have been 1975, 76, somewhere in that time, had never heard of. And in spite of the fact that, I live literally, the graves of the Harpers are 75 feet from the back of my house. So, but I had walked through that part of the cemetery many times and had never noticed that all those people had some kind of connection. And she did a wonderful, I think it was a half-hour radio job, and that landed her the job working on television news, and that landed her a job becoming not only a great crime reporter for the Anchorage Daily News. She grew up in New York, so of course the New York tabloids were her journalism ideal. But she also was the ear for many years, publishing Alaska's greatest rumor column. But I just thought I'd let you know I'm going to get in touch with Sheila, who's now retired, and try to get her to come here for this performance.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Regarding the individuals on the boat, they're at the State Museum as part of the museum exhibit. There's a beautiful little digital display that lists all of the known victims and whatever's known about them. It's really beautiful. You should, if you get a chance to go by the museum, go and check that out. And I know that David has asked all the members of the chorus to go look through that list and find somebody that they wish to represent.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim. And because the chorus members, they don't all have actual characters that they're singing. They're just, a passenger on the Sophia. But it's really important for them all to adopt an identity of an actual person that died on the ship. And I Dave's such a pro, to think that something like that would be important, and of course it is. So yeah. And the other thing, I believe First Friday next week, the State Museum will be open, and you can go in for free if you'd like. But I would encourage you. Both the Alaska State Museum and the Juneau Douglas City Museum have been just wonderful all year, and they asked me to remind people that you don't just have to go to the museum on First Friday. You can go anytime, and you can get memberships. That's really great too, and I really do encourage you to do that. Any more questions?
Hi, I got to Juneau in the early 70s, and I do have a recollection when I first heard about the sinking of the Princess Sophia was very early on around that time that they actually made an announcement on the ferry.
Oh.
I don't know if that was some particular purser who found it interesting or something, but as we would pass Vanderbilt Reef, coming from Haines, I just remember hearing that story a couple times and about the surviving dog and so forth. So somehow, that came to me a little more promptly in my residency in Juneau than apparently it does nowadays. I have a cousin in Victoria. She is not a descendant, although her mother lived there as a small child in 1918. And I'm not a descendant either, but we are cousins, and she's never been to Juneau, so I took this opportunity to invite her to come to Juneau for the commemoration. And I think that's pretty special since both our communities were so deeply affected. A couple other things. Point of fact, I'm going to be that fuss budget. Because I always say I'll email someone and point it out later, but Paisley is in Scotland, as a matter of fact, not England, as your slide said. So those of us with a drop of Scottish blood will tell you those are two different places, different countries. Another point of fact is on the Remember the Sophia website, they have the dates wrong for the opera. And once again, I actually did try to email them to point that out, and it's still wrong.
I'll talk to Carl about that.
Yeah, they have the 25th, 26th, and matinee on the 27th. Oh. Now, you go to buy tickets, and you'll find out otherwise. But, that needs to be addressed. And one other thing. I know I'm touching on a lot of topics. Thank you for mentioning Lulu May Eads, because I was trying to think which crew member on the Sophia had that surname, and you reminded me, no, it was Mr. and Mrs. Eads from Dawson City. Right. Is there any known relation to your
We get that question a lot. There is no connection between Emerson Eads and Lulu May and Marie Eads, unfortunately. That would be cool. But yeah, as far as we know, that's just a coincidence. And you reminded me also something that I think is really cool about everything that's happening this month is it's serving kind of as a family reunion for a lot of people. my parents and my aunt are coming to Juneau, and there's other people. Emerson's family is coming from Fairbanks, and I keep hearing, oh, my so and so is flying in, and Genevieve's coming, and her parents are here. You know, it's just really cool. It's because it's a time for us to all come together and go through this experience together as families and a community. So I think that's really special. Any further questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go to the Red Dog and play on a burlesque show. Thank you. And thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you, Katy.